Welcome back everyone, and thank you for joining me on another trip down memory lane. And today's animated journey is one of high adventure that's beyond compare. In the fall of 1984, Disney staff met at the home of newly appointed CEO Michael Eisner to flesh out some original concepts for Disney's planned entry into the world of animated television series. Ideas floated at that meeting ranged from hybrid animals to gummy candy. This was more than just a creative meeting, however, and these animated TV shows were not simply another Disney expansion. They were being developed to save the company. The truth is that by the mid-1980s, Disney had hit rock bottom, and desperate times called for desperate measures. Amid fighting off a series of corporate takeover attempts, a SaveDisney campaign resulted in the appointment of Eisner, whose first move was to take a huge gamble on branching off into the world of animated television series, seen at that time as very risky business. This bold decision not only saved Disney from the brink, but completely revitalized the company's fortunes, ushering in the dawn of the Disney Renaissance, as well as changing the face of animated television forever. To learn more, we need to go back to the mid-1980s and relive the beginning of Disney's adventures in animated series. The Walt Disney Company went into a slow but steady decline following the death of both its founders, Walt Disney in 1966 and his brother, Roy O. Disney, in 1971. Throughout the 1970s, Walt Disney Studios would produce some notable live-action films and animated films, but the rate at which these animated films were released slowed down somewhat, and the responses to these films were mixed. Animated films like The Rescuers and The Fox and the Hound were both box office and financial successes. Other features like The Aristocats and Robin Hood were only mild successes, while many others, including a substantial portion of Disney's ever-increasing live-action films, were box office bombs. The release of The Black Cauldron in 1985 has been seen as a rock-bottom moment for the company. A critical and commercial failure, the $44 million budget made The Black Cauldron the most expensive animated film ever made at the time, but only grossed $21.3 million domestically. The staggering loss for Walt Disney Productions put the future of the animation department in serious jeopardy, and The Black Cauldron subsequently earned the nickname, the film that almost killed Disney. After a series of corporate takeover attempts in 1984, Roy E. Disney, nephew of Walt and son of Roy O. Disney, resigned from the company's board of directors and launched a campaign called SaveDisney. The response was the hiring of Michael Eisner as Disney's new CEO, and Frank Wells as president. Eisner had left Paramount Pictures after being passed over for the job as studio chief, and was subsequently tasked by Disney with saving and strengthening the company. His first move was to expand Disney into new areas, beginning with the establishment of a television animation division that year, aimed at producing the company's first original animated series. The Walt Disney Company first ventured into the television industry as early as 1950. Beginning with the one-hour TV special, 1 Hour in Wonderland. An anthology television series has been produced since 1954 under several titles and formats, and the program's current title, The Wonderful World of Disney, was used from 1969 to 1979 and again from 1991 onward. The Mickey Mouse Club was a children's variety show that aired intermittently from 1955 to 1996, and the adventure series Zorro ran from 1957 to 1959. However, one element was missing from Disney's expansion into television: an original animated television series. Until the early 1980s, the studio had never produced its own original animated shows in-house, as Walt Disney himself felt it was economically impossible, and this became a mandate among Disney executives. Nearly all pre-1985 TV animation were wraparound segments made to bridge the gaps on existing theatrical material on the wonderful world of Disney. At first, Eisner strongly considered shutting down the feature animation studio and outsourcing future animation. It was only after the intervention of Roy E. Disney that Eisner had both a change of heart and a change in course, instead deciding to expand Disney into new areas, beginning with the establishment of a television animation division. The Walt Disney Television Animation Department was formed in December 1984, with Gary Crissell as president and Michael Webster as senior vice president. The establishment of this new animation division was considered a risky move, as animated TV series were generally considered to be low-budget investments up until that point. Many critics also felt that Disney's own animation studio had lost a lot of its luster during the period from Walt Disney's passing in the 1960s through to the 1980s. However, around this time the studio were forced to take several risks. Some ended in disaster, but the majority paid off nicely. The studio successfully gambled on the idea that a substantially larger investment into quality animation could be made back through both network and cable television. The final result was a string of high-budget animated television productions, which proved not only to be profitable ventures, but also raised the standard for the TV medium. A meeting was held at Michael Eisner's own home, and the result of that meeting would change the course of both Disney and Saturday morning cartoons forever. Several Disney staff members attended the meeting, where they were tasked with coming up with new ideas for original animated television series. While many who were present at the meeting recall being given lots of creative freedom, they were restricted by one clear mandate. Eisner dictated that what was off-limits was the use of any of the principal Disney cartoon characters in the new television programs, meaning that they would have to come up with entirely new and original characters for their new and original animated series. In that same meeting, Michael Eisner himself pitched the first two ideas to become Disney's first animated series. Eisner mentioned to his staff that his kids loved eating gummy bear candies, and that maybe they should make a show about that. The result? Adventures of the Gummi Bears. Another idea pitched by Eisner for his new Disney television animation studio was an idea that was eventually developed into the Wuzzles. Both of these concepts were based on talking animal-based premises. The third series in a similar vein, Fluffy Dogs, was produced as a single hour-long TV movie pilot, but never made it to fruition due to the pilot's dismal viewership. Production was immediately begun on both the Wuzzles and the Gummi Bears, and both shows debuted in the United States on the same day, Saturday the 14th of September 1985, in the same time slot, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, with the Wuzzles being broadcast on CBS and the Gummi Bears on NBC. The premise of the Wuzzles is that the main characters are hybrids of two different animals, although double species are not limited to the Wuzzles themselves. In fact, nearly everything on the Isle of Wuzz is mixed together in the same way that the Wuzzles are, from appleberries to castle scrapers. A solid voice cast included such names as Brian Cummings, Alan Oppenheimer, Frank Welker and Tress MacNeille, and the characters in the show were also marketed extensively, appearing in children's books, as posable figures and plush toys, even a board game. The Wuzzles wasn't much of a success, and only 13 episodes were produced before it ended after its first season. Production on the show was stopped after its initial run, largely due to the sudden death of Bill Scott, the voice of Musil. CBS cancelled the show, and ABC picked it up and showed reruns during the next season. They aired it at 8 a.m. so that the two Disney shows would not be in competition with one another. In comparison, Adventures of the Gummi Bears was a runaway success, running for 6 seasons between 1985 and 1991, with 65 episodes produced in total. While having nothing to do with the candy, the series focuses on the escapades of the eponymous Gummi Bears, anthropomorphic bears who are the last remnants of a once great civilization of gummies. Now regarded by most of humankind as fairy tales, the show's main cast of Gummi Bears live in the vast subterranean warren of Gummi Glen in the medieval kingdom of Dunwin. The series also boasted talented voice actors such as Paul Winchell, Jim Cummings, June Foray and Lorenzo Music, while the famous theme song was performed by Joseph Williams from the band Toto. We cannot understate the importance and the legacy of Adventures of the Gummi Bears. The show is often credited by animators and animation historians as having helped jumpstart the television animation boom of the mid-1980s and 1990s. This was partially because, unlike competitors like Hanna-Barbera and Formation, Disney as a multimedia conglomerate could draw upon its considerable financial resources for a lavish production budget for this series, gambling that they could profit in syndication. Competitors were forced to either raise their artistic standards to compete, like Hanna-Barbera, or inspire new competitors of equivalent corporate size to enter the field with similar financial commitments, such as Warner Brothers. The Gummi Bears' success meant it also became the forerunner to Disney's famous Disney afternoon time slot, which gave way to other famous serialized Disney television series, such as DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, Goof Troop, Bonkers, and Gargoyles. Although many of these shows exceeded it in budget and length, Adventures of the Gummi Bears, along with DuckTales, is often credited as setting the standard for all television animation which followed. The Disney afternoon time slot went on to dominate children's television throughout most of the 90s. An exception was made to allow Donald Duck to appear in the pilot episode of DuckTales in 1987, but Michael Eisner's dictate of prohibiting the use of major Disney animated stars was eventually broken in 1992 with the release of Goof Troop, the only show of the Disney afternoon to reach the 2000s. Michael Eisner himself remains a controversial figure at Disney, and his record isn't one of 100% success, but he did manage to do what he was brought in to do: save Disney, and not only that, but completely revive their fortunes, and his decisions ultimately led to a revamp of increased standards in television animation, almost single-handedly bringing Western animation out of the dark ages it had found itself in. What would follow with the imminent release of The Little Mermaid in 1989 would be the literal Disney renaissance of the 1990s. That's for another time, but before you go, I'd like to ask you, what was the earliest Disney animated series you enjoyed watching when you were younger? And also, did you ever watch the Wuzzles? Thank you for watching. Please give this video a like if you feel that you learned something today, and be sure to subscribe for more history of Saturday morning cartoons. I'll be back soon with some spooktacular content for you in time for Halloween. Stay tuned.